So today, this is Two Black Sisters Discuss. Hashtag woke racism. What does that mean to you? Audrey Hall from All FM is going to be discussing that with us. Internationally renowned presenter. She's going to be joining us in a minute to talk about woke racism. And the term woke, what is it even on about? Well, to me, let's start before Audrey joins us. What is it to me? Well, woke is about being enlightened. It's a terminology, obviously, we can all look into the dictionary for what woke really stands for, what it really means. But essentially, it's a terminology which is being used in communities that for people who have, how are we going to discuss ourselves now today? I suppose we've got to have a term that we all agree with, because that's something that people are disagreeing with at the moment as well, is even what people want to be called by. So we used to be called BAME or BME here in the UK, and people are saying, no, I don't want that terminology anymore. People like myself who were in the trade union movement, we called ourselves Black. Over many years of sort of arguing backwards and forwards, people decided that we could all agree that where there is a common experience of racism, we are happy to call ourselves Black. Common experience of racism, discrimination, colonialism, that there was a commonality between us all, and we could unify under the term Black, and it wasn't to denote Black as a colour, it's really a political term. We seem to be having some trouble getting Audrey in on the meeting today. I'm not so sure why, and I'm going to have to kind of look for her in the worlds of internet, but till she comes, yeah, just deciding who people should be known at is a thing now. So we look like we're going for communities experiencing discrimination, communities experiencing racial adversity, communities experiencing, what's the other one? What would you call it? What do you want to be called? Does it matter to you? Get your views in that chat there. I'd love to know what you're thinking on that one. She's finally here. So great, let's see what Audrey thinks about that. Oh, Audrey, you're here at last. You're here. You're with us. We can't hear you. Famous words from everybody.
Hello.
You're muted. Yeah. Hi. How are you? We're looking at your promo picture and not you. So are you putting your video on? Are you joining us today? Yes, she is. She's joining us today. Great. Good. Well, you're joining us as we're talking about terminology, actually, because we took a step back. Today, of course, it's about woke racism, what this terminology woke is all about, why it's causing offence. Is it a progressive term? Is it a term that's being looked at as if people are almost in a cult, the woke cult? I hear that it's lefties that it applies to. I mean, that's a funny one, because I never knew I was a lefty. Somebody had to let me know what a lefty was. I remember the first time I was called a trot, I was like, what is that? It was long before I understood about Trotskyism.
I think, first of all,
I was just saying, Audrey, that was where you've come in is where we were just talking about BAME, BME, and what people want to be known as. Sorry, we weren't talking about the woke first. It was the BAME thing. Who do you want to be known as?
Black, because I am. First of all, I need to say huge apologies. I mean, talk about BMT. Now, this wasn't BMT deliberately today, incidentally, folks. This was a multitude of problems. If anybody knows me, Audrey Hall, on All FM, you know that technology is not my, when I say technology, I'm talking about socials and all of this live streaming and all of this kind of stuff is not exactly my forte. And of course I click to go live and my camera's not working, and then I have to go to settings, and for somebody like me it's a big deal. So I had to do all of that, and then it's like, okay, let's go live. And I could hear Elizabeth and I was desperate to join because of the things that you were talking about, and thwarted yet again. Went through a whole procedure to go live, and I've now been told that I'm allowed access in 24 hours. So that's marvelous. So that's the first thing, a huge apology. It's quite funny actually, because there is this thing about BMT and stereotypes, isn't there, about soon
Well,
coming.
explain what's BMT.
BMT is Black Man Time,
Yeah.
and it means soon come. And soon come could be in 5 minutes, it could be in 50 minutes, it could be in 5 days, because that's soon come, because you know that you're coming. Like you'll come, and there isn't this big kind of, well, exactly what time will it be? However, in terms of live streaming, obviously I know it's crucial. So huge apologies for that. What would I like to be known as? I went through a whole process last year, post George Floyd, and it was a very difficult process, incidentally. I only realized at the end of it, it actually had a name, and that name is Black Trauma. And I marveled at how I could be aged 60 years old and had never heard of something called Black Trauma, but that was something that I was actually living through, because I was doing programs which caused us to examine the reality of Black life in Britain. We're talking about daily realities, these stories that have been so disgracefully disenfranchised, if you like, by Mr. Sewell and his report, in terms of the importance of people being able to tell their stories and tell their stories in their own way, which obviously, as you know, is very much what I do. But I was in a real, honestly, Elizabeth, I was in turmoil, and I didn't know what that turmoil was. All I knew is that I was hurting. And the more I watched and the more I learned and the more I saw, I came to the same conclusion that we are a people who are crying. It is almost like you could see visible tears in our eyes, and every single thing I watched, even the uplifting things, where they had a bit of an uplift, if you like, in the end. You know, if you think about the Small Axe films, and if you think about the police one, and there was some sort of a tiny little bit, if you like, of a victory in the end, it was also questionable. You know, and I didn't know what it was that I was going through. All I knew is that it didn't feel right. And I found, thank goodness, a lady called Olatunde Spence online, and she was talking exactly about Black trauma, and it had a name, and she is a psychotherapist who deals with trauma. And she came onto the show and explained the whole thing. And obviously I have the luxury of a 2-hour show. She explained it through generational discrimination to gender discrimination to what's happening with women, what's happening with them, what's happening with the family, imperialism, colonialism, and history, and, you know, our reality, and so on and so forth. And also put in the context of, you know, again, our reality in Britain, i.e. we fare worst in almost every single aspect of life, which we've also known about since 2017, incidentally, when Mr. Lammy did the 5 reports for David Cameron, where he went through and they talked about the Black reality of life. And for some reason, nothing really happened since. And for me, it was terrible. but it had a name. It then started to make sense. And then again, I had the pleasure of the company of Diane Grayson on the show, who talked about racism and equality and diversity and the equality pay gap. And she is the person who we explored terminology, the BAME thing. I know I've taken a long time to get here, Elizabeth.
Oh, no, this is great. No, not at all.
Taking me a long time to get here is because it is not, I realize and recognize it is not easy. But for me, unquestionably, I am Black and I want to be known as Black. That's it. You know, yes, if you want to say African Caribbean, if you like, fine. But I'm happy with Black. But Diane explained to me the nuances and what's going on in terms of what we used to call mixed race children, which are now called mixed heritage children. And this whole idea of this BAME, how the parameters, if you like, for each case are so small, it doesn't make sense, because African people are not the same as Caribbean people, and you know, Pakistani people perhaps are not the same as, I don't know, somebody coming from somewhere else in the middle. I mean, Elizabeth, what she was saying is that BAME is too broad a term to capture what we're actually talking about, and people who are falling into the dual heritage or mixed heritage have every right to say, actually, no, I'm not Black and I'm not Chinese, I'm half of each, or I'm not Black and I'm not white, I'm half of each. I am dual heritage, that's me. And, you know, I heard that and, you know, think to myself, what right do I have to impose on anybody what they can call themselves? It's up to them what they want to call themselves. But the interesting thing is that these labels have been given to us. We didn't choose them. They have been given to us. So what do I think about BAME? I want to be known as Black. I think it is too broad a term. And, you know, interestingly enough, something else that Diane Nelms pointed to, Diane Grayson, I beg your pardon, Diane Nelms, she was one of the big bosses at ITV. Very interesting story. Very interesting story about Diane Nelms. If we have time, you can ask me, because it's relevant. It is actually relevant.
Is it to this?
Yeah, it is actually, because it's kind of my journey in life, and it is actually.
And our journeys are important to all of them.
Yeah, the point of it is, Elizabeth, is that you know, she told me that, for example, African people earn more than Caribbean people, and Pakistani people earn less than I can't remember which country she used as the example, but you know, it's like, so what? So you're telling me that there's discrimination within the discriminated groups? So yeah, I think it's a biggie. But you know, the other interesting thing, the third person I had onto my show to talk about race and equality was none other than the chair of the Greater Manchester Race Panel, Elizabeth Cameron herself. And you said something, Elizabeth. You actually said something. You said something about they disrespect us by giving us these titles. You see, I remember my show.
You're very good at remembering. Yes.
But my show and opinion is informed by what I hear. And I speak to people like you who are experts in the field, who are out there day in, day out, discussing these matters. I am not. My job is to facilitate and help to spread the message. But obviously I do it in terms of social commentary because I happen to have a point of view, because how can I not? You know, which is another problem, because how can you not? And you know something, Elizabeth, you know, this woke thing, I actually heard something on Radio 4 today. Anne Robinson was on Woman's Hour, and she referred to this whole thing about mixed race and dual heritage as woke. And she basically said, who is anybody to tell her what she can say? And she would very much like to have a conversation with those people who are telling her what she is allowed to say. Now, if you...
Is that like a take your earrings statement? Take your earrings off statement. She would very much like to have a conversation with. What does that mean?
I think,
Um,
darling, I actually was quite encouraged, and I intend to follow it up because I want to know. I was impressed to hear she said various things that she's in her 70s, so a lot of it was about, being able to still work in your 70s and this, that, and the other. She made some really good points. Like one of the points was, somebody said the presenter said to her something like, you're always well turned out, and she said, absolutely, I'm impeccably turned out. What do you expect? What do you expect? Do you think they're going to put somebody on television who looks like they've been dragged through a hedge backwards? That is exactly the sort of no, but Elizabeth, that is exactly what I kind of think. It's like, why isn't she entitled to say that if that's what she wants to say? And she did say it, but then she went on to say lots of other things as well. But yeah, she did refer to that as woke. And I really have a problem with this word woke because I don't know what it means. To me, it seems like it's an excuse. It seems to be the replacement for what they used to call PC. Oh, it's all PC, we're scared,
yeah.
we don't know what to say anymore. Well, why don't you know what to say anymore? I'm a black person, it's fine, no problem.
But why did they have to start saying something about that? They don't know what to say. They don't know what to say. They don't know what to call people. Call them by their name. That's a start.
Exactly, we don't say
If you respect people equally, I'm sure that comes through. It's like these people who, they think somehow you haven't noticed the disdain that they have for you because they haven't actually said those words, but it's all there in the body language. It's all there in their approach. I'm not going to use the word attitude. It's all to do with their approach towards you. So you very quickly know whether somebody is approving or disapproving of you. And you can say the same words differently many different times. I know as an actress that that's one of the things you would do in a drama role play. Sometimes you would take one series of words, a sentence perhaps, or a collection of words, and you would say them with different intonations, sometimes in a happy way, sometimes in an insulting way. Same words, same words, same words, and all about your approach, all about the way you say them. I know the derivations of how finite you can change a way you say something, the lilt, the length, your behavior, your delivery to mean something entirely different. And so if people want to know the nuances of microaggressions, think about things like that. Think about how you say what you say, how you speak to people, how you treat people. It goes before you, and we're not dumb, and I'm going to say that, dumb. We're not dumb. We can work that out. So woke, coming back to that, that's very interesting, and I'm glad that you started this out by saying those statements. I just think that that statement that they can come and talk to me, it's like white privilege, and it's at its best. It's just like, how many different ways can you say F you? Sorry, I'm not going to swear on this program, but that's what I'm saying. That's what that is. That's just like, and I'll tell you, like it's just that whole attitude I've lived with my whole life. It's like, and then when they say that about our culture, our background, but we're not supposed to feel any response or reaction to that. Of course I feel a response and reaction to that. Are you telling me I can't be, I can't be enlightened as to the level of racism that there is in society right now, or be more enlightened about the society's constructs in terms of racism, where it all comes from historically, because that is what we're talking about. That's what woke is. That's what woke is.
I think
It's a level of understanding.
I think you hit it the nail on the head when you basically talked about it in terms of white privilege. And that is such a huge, huge area. And Elizabeth, it's something that that you and I have talked about needing to explore even more. It's the things which white people say, which black people wouldn't dream
We wouldn't
of
dream of
saying.
saying that.
So it's like, you know, if you take it at its simplest form, what shall we call you? Your response, call me by my name, is the answer, because actually the person who is asking the question, we're not calling them anything. We are
I
calling
know.
them by their name. We are not putting them into a
All
category. We're calling them by their name. So if you take it in its absolute simplest forms, yes, it's that. And I also think that this is actually in its simplest forms the same thing that we are talking about, and that is treat us with the same dignity and respect as you treat yourselves. Why is it that for us to be treated with the same dignity and respect, it has to somehow have a label of being PC? It's not being PC. This is called, you know, you
PC meaning politically correct.
yes, this is called human rights. This is called basic human rights. Is it not that all men are, under God are created equal? I mean,
Yeah.
we know, unfortunately, because of the systems that we've lived through, that that is not the case. And what, you know, I'm trying to do in my way, and certainly what I know, and I don't mean every time, but certainly what you're doing in your work, is raising awareness. And you know, Elizabeth, the other interesting thing is, when I came back to broadcasting, I did not come back to broadcasting to cover Black issues. And I know that I've said this to you before. I came back to broadcasting to broadcast because I absolutely adore broadcasting and I love music. And I started to talk, and but you know, straight away I wanted it to be a conversation. So that meant that if there's a conversation, we're not just going to say, you know, yeah, I like that, and my influence is Mary, and you know, my mum used to play this. It's like, what's your reality of life? And inevitably the reality of life for an awful lot of musicians, regardless of their complexion, is it's tough. But for Black peoples, it's 3 times tougher, and that's for the stars. And I know that because as soon as George Floyd happened, we had India RE online basically crying for 13 minutes, talking about the reality of what happens when, you know, she was saying that, I think, I can't remember if it was Taylor Swift or it was certainly a massive star, and she was saying it's fantastic. They're saying that they're digging me and they're really into my music. It's fantastic. These people have 25 million followers. So when you're saying that you're digging me, put my picture up there, put my album up there, put a link to my website up there, because you know what? That's helping. That would help. That would go to your 25 million people. You're saying that I'm your influence. And obviously, you know that the way that they're singing in terms of bringing in the voices and this and you know what's going on in the music industry. She's saying, you're digging me, give me my dues, give me a leg up. And she was almost crying for 13 minutes. And she was saying that she gets paid 3 times less and treated really badly and doesn't go first class and blah, blah, blah. And it sort of went on. And this is not me making it up. This is her testifying. And so many other people doing exactly the same thing.
Such an important story, Audrey.
You know, the point of it is, Elizabeth, is you know, we're talking about equality of opportunity. We're talking about being able to be given a chance to do something. And the reality is that certainly what I'm finding is that I'm having to create this reality myself. And you know, when I was saying that I didn't go back to broadcasting to cover Black issues, I didn't. But interestingly enough, for George Floyd, I actually wasn't in. So I thought I'll do a tribute, and I'll do a little blog, and I will list the shows that I have done. And there are 12 shows where we have literally, where George Floyd and the implications of the reality of life for Black people have been discussed in one sense or another. And I find that, you know, in one sense surprising, in another sense enlightening, in another sense, what do you expect? It was the most important thing to happen to us as Black people. We watched murder, and we expected because of the promises after that murder that things actually would become a little easier. And
And
yes,
well,
and little progress has been made. I'm not going to deny that, but certainly, I know people like me are still pushing for it, still pushing to find that place.
well, Yes, so much there, but you said it so well, Audrey. I'll come in really with what you said at the end. Um, I, because it wasn't George Floyd's murder per se. It's what that opened up for us, wasn't it? About that, the conversations that have been able to be had that have followed on from that, and the progress that we all hope that will be made, that makes this woke phrase being used as
It's almost a dismissive phrase.
with disdain, for it to be used in that way, to be so insulting, because you know what that meant to us is a very important step forward, and it's like rubbishing it, isn't it? Essentially, it's
Yeah.
saying that everything that we became, you know, able to discuss, to be courageous enough to put forward, was not really important. And it's like it's just a political correctness, and frankly, can it go away please now?
Let's just dismiss it. It
You
doesn't.
know, let's just dismiss this. It's not important, it doesn't matter. But of course that's not how it is for us. For us, for so many of us, we might not have had the courage to say these things. I did an interview just talking about COVID. They asked me, you know, it was supposed to be what we thought about it and how it had been for us, for me, not for us. I was being asked as an individual how COVID had impacted on me. I had to cover things like having lost, you know, the losses that there've been, you know, having lost my, you know, ex-father-in-law, let's call him that. You know, we lost Uncle Fred, we lost Uncle, it was one,
Aubrey,
Carberry,
my
our
namesake,
namesake.
my namesake.
And
Barbara.
you know, we had losses. So it started out with that, but very quickly, you know, as they say, you know, did I trust the government? Were the messages that came out okay? It's an independent organization that's doing this research. I kind of got halfway through it where I had to say, are you independent or are you being paid for by the government? Because I realized it has very quickly become me talking about a lack of trust with the government who didn't take the messages correctly, and so on, and how I feel they're partially to blame for the losses, and so on. But the point is, bringing us back to why we're here, is that I talked a lot about Black Lives Matter, about what that had meant to us. So I will talk about Black Lives Matter more than George Floyd, I think.
No, of course. I use it.
I know we mean
As
the same
I
thing
use it.
interchangeably,
Yeah,
isn't it?
I just use it as a
Sure,
summary.
sure. I'm
But
just making that
absolutely.
clarification
No,
because
no,
you know you
absolutely.
don't know who'll listen to this and
No,
when, and
absolutely.
you know,
And
so just to
Elizabeth,
make that clarification.
you're absolutely right to, and more so because people think that this is a new thing, the Black Lives Matter
Oh
movement.
yeah,
And of course, it is not new. And that's the whole point. Yes, there was a resurgence and there was like a big energy, but Black Lives Matter had been going. So Black Lives Matter always and do, and so on. But honestly, Elizabeth, it's you know, I've interrupted you, and I forgive me.
oh
But
no, not at all.
it
This is
is,
our
it's
conversation. It's our conversation, and this is how it is for us. Is that there is more than one thing, as I've said with the COVID research. Before I knew it, I was talking about how that had impacted. Before I knew it, I was talking about how it's impacted on my work, and how, you know, it's caused a job loss. And before I knew it, I was talking about care homes, and the lack of funding into social care reform, and the need for social care reform. And you know, is there one thing that just impacts on us? Is there one area that they can sort of push Black people away to and say, this is your concern, so only be concerned with this? And isn't that what woke is all about? is saying, actually, this isn't just one thing about us, you know, because I could clearly talk here about employment. I could, you've touched on that. You talk about your experience in the media, you know, touched on that. India.Arie, fantastic example. I did not know what you were talking about there, or that for 13 minutes she cried, but that breaks. I met India.Arie, and I just, it just, what it took me back to, as you explained that, and you just did it so well, because you know, you evoked all the emotion inside of me as you spoke, because I visualized her. I thought about her music that I listen to so often, the albums that are next door, and the respect that I have for her as an artist, and how awful that she should have feel like reduced in that way, you know, but the raw emotion we feel.
Exactly.
You know, but what it did was catapult me back, actually, to all those things, to the blues, to the stealing, the actual raping, the pillaging of everything that is good about us, and everybody tries to own it, from the cultural, from the way we dress, from our coolness, from, I'm saying so I don't know, I'll be offended some
Lip
here,
the
but
bottom,
you know, all
lip
of
the
that,
bottom,
you know,
lip
you know, yes, the lips
the lips
being,
the bottom.
all of that,
That's
all
absolute
of
nonsense.
that, from the tanning machines, to, you know, I just, where does it begin and where does it end? But then to, you know, when, oh, sorry, that we've actually risen through this, we've risen through some of this pain to be able to vocalize it in an intellectual way, or a way that we can own it. There had to be a tidal, you know, a diminution of a terminology
Absolutely.
to be fully satisfied with the power that there is in whiteness to push us down, whatever we're thinking, or whatever we try and own, or however much we try and rise above some of the oppression that we go through. But yes, when you talked about India.Arie, I thought about the blues, the people in the blues. I thought about Elvis Presley, who, you know, at times actually did admit that, you know, his influences have all come from Black people. It just goes on, and that list really is onward. And when I watch the stories of those who turn to drugs and drink, and you know, died,
What do you expect?
was that heartbreak that she cried about.
What do you expect? Elizabeth, honestly, you know that I'm into my jazz, and you know I've not played very much of the traditionals at all. I'll drop in an Oscar Peterson, or I'll drop in something, because you know I'm sort of thinking to myself, you know, I'm trying to do a bit of everything. So I always say the best of the old, new, borrowed, and the blues. But the reality is, the old guys, this is why I have so much respect, and this is why I cannot understand why every single Black person does not say, yes, I love jazz and it's mine, because it is so, so important in the evolution of music per se. And the things that those guys went through, they had lobotomies, Elizabeth, some of them, you know, the things that they went through, you know, they would go on stage and play, obviously allowed in through the back door, not allowed in through the front door. Um, you know, why does our music sound the way our music sounds? I think our music sounds the way it sounds, Elizabeth, because there is this thing inside of us. It's pain. It's almost like a plaintive cry. I know that there's a lot of beautiful music. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that there aren't happy songs, because there's loads of them. But why does it sound the way it sounds? Why do our singers sound the way that they sound? Because they're singing from here. It's in their sinews, it's in their blood. What people don't realize is that whilst it's uncomfortable, perhaps, to hear Black people talk about race, what do they think it is like for us to be feeling that we have to be in a position to talk about race? That's the thing that gets me. What is it like for us to, you know, for a person to feel that they almost have to justify their being? It's a weird one. It's
Well,
a weird one.
well, you, yes, absolutely. Everything you've said there, absolutely agree. And it's almost not a weird one, actually. What it is the very construct of what is racism, which is about a power differential. Um, you know, one of the things that I often get asked in the training that I do is about Black people being racist. Or Black people can be racist too. And you can be racist towards one another and so forth. And what I try and explain to people, and you know, there are different people who will say
Different
things
attitudes.
on this, but I always maintain, and the academics would agree, Black, white, the same really, is that you have to go back to the constructs of it, and that is it's about abuse of power in the same way as coercive control. You know, when you're talking about physical abuse or domestic abuse, you know, if there is a power differential there and we can't exert that power because we are in the minority numbers in a society, or our access to the constructs, what it is our access to the constructs that make you be seen as powerful in society are less. That's essentially it. So as long as we don't have that ability to usurp that over another, then we can't then be called racist in the things that we could say. We could be called rude, we could be called discriminatory, and lots of other different things. If you know, I'm not certainly not saying that everybody, that even from the culture I come from, is perfect, but we can't be called racist, because if you understand racism in its purest term, then it has to be about that abuse of power, or that lending of power, and using it against somebody who has less power.
Should we put out our plea to Anne Robinson? Should we invite her to come and have a chat with us about this? Because I'd love to talk to Anne Robinson.
Yeah, who'd you like to talk to the most? Yeah. You know, I did say before we go out here, because I know our time is almost up, but I did say that our police chief in Greater Manchester has said some comments. So I did admit that, and you know, even though I have a very important role in terms of with that race panel, some people were deeply by those comments that had been made.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that over those views have a right to be heard. Yeah.
Absolutely. I also am aware of this. I did make reference to it in the programme last week, because certainly Andy Burnham said when he was on the show, that was one of the things that he was actually very proud of, the work that you guys are doing with the Police Commission and the work that you're doing with the authority, and the fact that you are absolutely, I won't say demanding answers, but you are, you know, whatever analogy you use, no stone unturned. You are thoroughly going to look into it, because obviously there are so many areas where there are disparities in treatment of non-white people, shall we say. You know, the figures speak for themselves. You've got lots of questions, and he said that that was an area that you were very, very keen to do work on. And I know that you and the panel have been doing work on that. However, for the chief executive to come in and to talk about woke policing is obviously of concern. It's of concern to me, because I don't know what it means. This whole idea, you know, it sort of gets silly, Elizabeth. It's almost like when I'm saying that, you know, people all the time want you to justify, oh, well, racism, oh, well, when was that then? Oh, well, how racist was that then? Or how does that measure then? Well, are you sure that that's what it is then? You know, and it almost seems like it's the same thing. You know, what does it mean? What does woke policing mean? You know, it's like, oh, well, when do you want them to take the knee then? No, it's not that. It's we see taking the knee as a mark of respect for the fact that Black people are not treated the same as white people. And actually in football, which is where they do take the knee, the racism there is so bad, and you know that the footballers only a few weeks ago all came offline because of trolling and this, that, and the other. It's basically saying that this is not acceptable. So, you know, me again, in my naivety, I just think, well, actually, yeah, you know, say, Black people, we agree with you. This is not acceptable, and we do take a stand against racism. And I kind of thought it was as simple as that, but clearly it isn't. You know, and then I've been told things like, you know, it's making it political. But surely him making that statement is making
Of
it
course, it's
political.
making it political. And one could argue, you know, I talked about white privilege, but I'll also talk about white fragility. And it's white fragility that causes people to want to undermine that this strength that people have found in coming together to own the levels at which racism occurs. And I'm glad that you made reference there to the words of Andy Burnham, who is, just to clarify, for not everybody will know, he is the Greater Manchester Mayor, and we're talking about Manchester as in Manchester, UK. So yeah, that's a very important interview that you had. And actually, you might want to put the link in of that into the chat when we are, you perhaps would replay this and put that link in so people will have the links to your shows, Audrey, because you've done some really, really important work on this. And I'm glad that you made reference, but 12 different shows, my goodness.
And Andy's was the last one, because we talk about it with Andy. And that's the whole point, Elizabeth. It's not like I'm setting out to do Black shows. I'm not. I'm just setting out to do shows. However, I'm responding to what's going on. And so therefore, I am responding to, I'm not going to say what the feeling is on the ground, but certainly what I know of a groundswell of opinion, that is in terms of people who are believing that there is work to be done. I have to add, Elizabeth, on the receiving end, there's an awful lot of people who think we're done, and they've heard enough of all of this racism.
No, they just would like us to be done. They don't think we're done. They don't think we're done. They just hope we are. And they're going to do everything they can to make sure it is done. And that's where the Sewell report comes in.
Yeah.
And that's where certain people who are placed in certain key places will start making statements about this wokeness. Dismiss it. Dismiss it. That's what it says. Dismiss it. A police person says it here. A head of the social care is going to say it there. Somebody else is going to say it in a judiciary. Somebody in parliament will say it next. And this is how people are playing. It's not by mistake. Key people will be chosen to say things.
It's almost like,
that's my belief.
Yeah, it's almost,
you can call me a conspiracy theorist, but
no. It's almost like, how dare they? You know, Elizabeth, it's weird, isn't it? It's almost like, you know what, you might have had a little bit of power, or you might have had a little bit of groundswell of opinion, or you might have had a little bit of something, but you know what, let's be quiet. We're done with that. What's next? I've heard enough of all of that racism stuff. I mean, everybody said that they're going to do something about it anyway, didn't they? They all said they were going to address diversity. Obviously, you know that they're addressing this diversity by getting in young people as apprenticeships or interns.
Yeah. Or one EDI person for every organisation. 2, because they don't actually want to say that this EDI push is actually a way of couching, yes, we're racist, we know we're racist, we've been shown to be racist, but what we're going to do is not admit that we are racist by making this post be anything to do with race equality. This post is only about equality, diversity, and inclusion, which is everything. So it's women, it's LGBT plus, it's Black people, it's disability, if we can, and young people and old people, basically it's everybody. So if we can do that when we don't have to call it racism, that's all right. So then it's just embedded into our organization. Our organization then effectively still might not do anything about race, because by the time we've sectioned all the different people off, SU section is the smallest. So that's why people like myself, and arguably yourself, Audrey, because you open up the conversation, which allows people to discuss this. So I make no business about saying your role is very key and the media's role is key. But that's why I will talk about intersectionality all the time with you, because if we talk about ourselves in intersectional terms, we fit into all those categories. And that's the way that we argue and ask for racial equality within the GMCA Race Equality Panel, because we won't separate ourselves as this little piece of the pie. We're saying we're in all those different pies, and we're in all those different areas of work. And there is no one piece of work that you're expecting the Race Equality Panel to be doing, because we're everywhere. And that's really what we're trying to do. So I've got a system like that, which is being set up at the moment. And I'm hoping this week to hear from GMCA about how I can involve some of the people who didn't perhaps get on the panel, real experts out there in the community who can join us and actually join these conversations. And, you know, you watch the space.
I think it is so important, this work, and so important not to let it fall off the radar. And you know, Elizabeth, you know, who cares about ratings? But I actually do have a look and see what people are following, and people aren't interested in race. They think it's done. I've actually written to a couple of people and said, you know, I think that people think race is done, and I'd really like to talk about this, because me as a woman, and you know, my experience and blah 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 blah, I don't think it is, and I'm kind of surprised that we're being, you know, they're kind of getting away with it, and you know, zero response. I thought about something else actually that Anne had objected to. She talked about the Coulson statue, and she said that that was wrong. She said that, you know, far better to put up a picture of put up a statue of somebody Black next to it, so that you could have the two next to each other and compare.
I can't even go into that. Shall we do that another week? Because it's time for us to wrap up. Great place to end it. The Coulson statue, should it have fallen? That's the title of next week's show. Thank you very much, Audrey, for opening up this conversation about woke racism. I think it was an important one. Hopefully we'll get some comments into the chat. We'll see if we need to return back on this again. Sorry, people, we didn't go live. We will try, we will endeavour to do that next time, so we can get a live interaction, hear from you and respond real time to what you're saying. Lovely to be with you. Nice to see you, Audrey, and see you all soon.
Thank you.
The Coulson statue fall.
It's history in itself, Elizabeth, in my opinion, but there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.